Hello and welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. In this video we're going to show you how to paint some stretchy skulls. So the first thing that I've done is I went onto Google, did an image search for human skulls, and I've printed out 6 skulls here that I liked that were detailed enough that we could use as a base reference to work from. What I'm doing here is I'm actually making some paper templates. You can go purchase already made templates from places like Art Tool and Airsick, but for this particular purpose I wanted some templates that I could use that were a little bit different. So easiest way to do that, like I said, jump on Google, find the references that you like. In this case what I've done is I've printed them all out in black and white and kept sort of the toning the same within Photoshop. And what we can do is we can actually, once we've made the template, we can flip them either side. So the frontal skull doesn't matter as much, but with the other skulls where they're facing a certain direction, if you want them to face the other way, obviously you just flip the paper and there you go, you've got your basic outline for your template. So these references were printed on photo paper, so just your regular inkjet photo paper. I find that works a little bit better if you are going to make some paper templates because it is a bit thicker and it's going to hold up a lot longer when you're spraying rather than using just a normal copy paper. Okay, so it's just an A4 sheet of paper, and within Photoshop, like I said, I made all the images black and white and then I laid them out so that I'd get 6 skulls easily onto the A4 bit of paper. What I'm doing now is using my X-Acto blade. I'm carefully cutting out the eye sockets and the nose socket, and now what I'm doing is I'm just going right around the perimeter of the skull, so that's going to give us the total outline and shape of it. And then we've got the eye socket and the nose socket as well there, so those are going to be lightly sprayed so that I know where they are going to appear. And then from that, what will happen is once we begin airbrushing, I can do all of the fill-in stuff, detail, all that sort of stuff. I'll do that freehand. Okay, so this is really just exactly the same way as you'd use any of the other pre-made templates. They are a freehand template, so that's exactly the way you should use them. You can see there that's cut out, so that one's pretty much ready to go. Alright, we'll put that one to the side. I've also kept the negative space there where I've pulled out the skull, so if you wanted to, you can also use those if you're spraying, say, on a black background and you want to put a white base down first. But for this particular artwork, we're not going to need those. What I've done now is I've just sped the video up a little bit just so that it's not too boring watching me cut out skulls. It's all pretty much the same. So we start with the eye sockets, the nose socket, and then what I've done there is I've just cut in sort of on the back part there. So near where the jaw is, I've cut that section there where I'm going to run a bit of a blend. So that's quite handy, and I've folded it up so you can use it as a bit of a handle as well. Now we're just going to keep going, cut out all these other ones. So again, start with the eye socket, do your nose, then the jawline, cut that little flap in there as well. So you can cut out as much as you want. If you like, you can also cut out sort of parts of the teeth so you know where they're going to be sprayed. Because when I start airbrushing, this particular freehand template is going to be like, you're spraying through that is virtually going to be your sketch. So you're going to work off what you see here. We're only lightly going to dust through the freehand template just to give us an idea of the shape and where the eye sockets are and the nose socket. So all the bits that are cut out will get a light spray with like a transparent black, and then that's essentially the sketch that you work from, rather than using, say, a grey lead pencil and drawing onto the panel. Now we are going to be doing a aluminium composite panel, so this is a sample panel for a customer. There's going to be a silver base sprayed on first, so that's another reason why I didn't want to use grey lead. I don't really like to use grey lead on silver bases because if you for whatever reason forget to get all of it off, or if you can still see grey lead marks, it looks a bit horrible when there's a nice metallic trying to shine through. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing a silver base. If it was white or something like that, or grey, it's not too bad. Any flat colour, but any sort of metallics, I tend to not draw on the surface if I can avoid it. So hence why we're using these freehand templates. So I've almost cut out all 6 skulls there. So I've got some different shaped skulls, different ones facing in different directions, some looking up, some looking sideways, and then I'll vary it off that. So when I say we're doing stretchy skulls, what I mean is they're basically going to be a skull and then bits of stretchy sort of skin coming off that skull and linking it to the next one. So this particular artwork is going to be airbrushed onto a Harley. So we're doing a sample panel just to see if the customer's happy with the style of artwork. So here we are, we've got the skulls cut out and ready to be used as templates. So you can see which parts I've cut out there. As I said, you can do more or less, whatever you want to do, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm actually going to cut out these side sections just under the jawline there. That way I'll easily be able to identify where the row of teeth starts, and then I can easily airbrush that in because I've got virtually a little guide there with that section, which will end up getting a little bit of overspray sprayed into it. Okay, so you can see there, I'm just going to pull out these final little details. So obviously the more time you spend on this, the more of a template you can make yourself, and sometimes that can make life a bit easier. But for this particular video, we didn't go too crazy. We didn't cut out all the teeth or any of the gaps between the teeth. So we just wanted to show you how majority of it will do freehand. It's just a good way to get the shape and everything, and especially if you're doing a repeated artwork, it works really well for that. So you can see here with something like this skull, you can flip it the other way and spray it that direction. So you don't need to print another template facing the other way. Okay, here they all are cut out, ready to rock. So they should work pretty well for what we're trying to achieve. A nice variation there of skulls. So like I said, feel free to track down any more that you might want to add in, or pick a style that you like and go with that. Okay, so as I mentioned to you earlier, we are working on an aluminium composite panel. I just removed the protective plastic there, so remember to do that. Now these aluminium composite panels, they come in a range of colors. I'm using a black one, and basically you get them from your local sign supply shop. I've got some paper towel here, so I'm going to tear off 2 pieces, one to wipe and one to wipe clean. And then I've got my KC10 wax and grease remover by House of Color. Alright, so that's basically like a prep sole. So any brand will work, doesn't have to be House of Color. And then what I'm going to do is, using gloves so that I don't get any of the residue from my fingers on there, I'm going to wipe the wax and grease remover on with one of the paper towels, and then wipe it with the other one, which is a clean paper towel, just to dry it off. So I remove all of that residue. So this is a good way to prep your panel. I'm going to use a grey Scotch-Brite, and now I'm going to scuff up that surface. So I just want to knock the shine off it. It's a bit hard to see on the video, but there is a glossy shine. One side's glossy, the other side's matte. So we generally work on the glossy side. So I just want to give that a nice Scotch-Brite, like sanding, just virtually the same as sanding it. If I was doing this on a Harley, I would actually sand it with something like an 800 or 1200 wet and dry, depending on what you're doing. Alright, so for the purpose of this video, and because it is just a sample panel, it's only going to hang up on our wall. It doesn't need to be, it's not going to be out in the weather, so it's not super duper crucial that we prep at 100%. It's just literally going to get displayed inside our shop. Alright, so Scotch-Brite will do that perfectly. So now that that's all scuffed up, you can kind of see it's scratched a little bit there. Now, using the same prep sol that I used earlier, I'm going to wipe off any of that residue that I got from Scotch Brighting it. So you do get still a bit of that sanding dust. Very similar to if you were sanding it with wet and dry sandpaper, so you'd have to wipe off the residue. We're doing exactly the same thing here. Okay, so now that that's clean, I'm going to switch to my water-based degreaser, which is a KC20 low VOC post sanding cleaner. So after sanding, I'm going to use this and just wipe the surface clean again. So this will just remove any other residue that may still be on there, left from either the sanding dust or the wax and grease remover that we used earlier. So this is just a surefire way to make sure that there's nothing left on there. You can see I'm wearing gloves so that I don't contaminate the surface. So again, 2 bits of paper towel, one to wipe it on and the other one to wipe it off. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm getting some just normal masking tape, automotive quality masking tape. With masking tape, I find it's best to spend a little bit more and get good quality stuff. You don't want to get just your standard DIY handyman masking tape, which does tend to leave glue. A lot of the cheaper brands do, so just have a look around and just get a good quality one. It definitely pays. So you don't want to go to all the effort of doing all your artwork and then you're left with this glue residue, or worse, if you use a cheap masking tape over the top of artwork, it can sometimes peel it off as well, so it can be a bit more aggressive than your automotive grade masking tape. So just look around or get it from your local auto shop. So I'm just masking a border. I like to do this with our sample panels. Makes it look a bit more complete once it's all done. Just gives it a nice finishing touch and gives it a really cool, clean look. So take your time, mask it up. As you can see, I've laid the edge of the tape to the edge of the composite panel so it's even all the way around. So now that we've done that, we've popped it up on our easel. You can see I've masked off the rest of the easel just to protect the overspray and also to keep the surface clean. Using my LPH 80, I'm doing a 50-50 overlap, and I am spraying some Orion Silver by House of Colour onto the panel. So that's the first pass. You can see it's a little bit patchy, even though I did a 50-50 overlap. So try and keep your overlaps nice and even. But we are going to be putting artwork over this, so we just need to get nice, good coverage of the silver, and then we can begin to airbrush over the top. So this is automotive paint that I'm using. That's why you're seeing that I'm wearing a mask. So always recommend that. So we've done 2 coats now, and this will hopefully be the final coat. So again, just keep doing your 50-50 overlaps, get a nice even coverage. You could try and do this with an airbrush, but it's going to take a lot longer and it's going to be harder to get a nice even coat. So if you do have a spray gun, definitely use that. So looking at that, we may just need one more coat to finish it off. So this time I'm going to start at the bottom and we're just going to work our way up just to get a nice amount of coverage. And that should do us, I think. That looks like it's pretty well covered. So we can get ready now and start creating our artwork. Okay, so let's get into some painting, or some airbrushing, should I say. We just did some painting. So using our first skull here and a HPCS gravity feed iWater Eclipse airbrush. This has a 0.35 needle in it. I'm actually using a automotive black mixed with SG100 Intercoat Clear by House of Colour. Now I've done this so that I've created a transparent black, like a more transparent black. So you can see I am spraying lightly through the gaps of the template, just holding it into place, and that's giving me my guide and my outlines for the skull, and then we can work in as we build the artwork. So I'm just lightly spraying in all the areas that I've cut out. So the transparent black just gives me a lot more control. I can really do a nice light dusting on there rather than using solid black and coming back further from the surface. This just allows me to go up a bit closer, get a light tone on there, and then later on when we start detailing, even using this tone as my first tone, I can still airbrush it a little darker. It just won't go as dark as a solid black. So what'll happen is at the end, in part 2 of this video, you'll see that when I further detail the skulls, I'll be using a normal black with just thinned with reducer, and then that will give me the deeper shadows. So this just establishes my artwork. As you can see here, I've got 5 skulls that are just laid out there, so I get an idea of where I'm going with it. And using this transparent black, that's a better shot there, so we're just going to pan up and show you. So you can see how light it is. You can see that the silver is still shining through. So hopefully as we go on in this video, you can see enough detail, because the silver does tend to reflect a little bit, but hopefully you get the idea of it. But you can see how simple that is to just get the general idea of where your skulls are going. You've got the main bits there that you can focus on and then work off them. So remember, even though I've got my outlines, that's pretty much all they are. The rest of the design, once I render each skull, the way that I join them with the stretchy skin, that's pretty much made up as I go. Alright, so if you are going to attempt this, then by all means you use your reference picture of the skull, so you can still do that, the one that you got from your Google search. So print them out or save them to your iPad so that you've got a clear reference that you can zoom in and out on. And then from there, all the stretchy stuff you can just make up. Alright, and join up your skulls, because depending on where you place them is going to depend on how you render the rest of it to match it all in and tie it all in. Okay, so I'm starting with that eye socket there. Now again, I'm using the same color that we used to spray the design on lightly through our template. So you can see how much darker that tone will go just by going up a bit closer. I'm still using my HPCS clips with the 0.35 needle in it. You can see my trigger fingers going back and forth every time that I move. I'm not worried too much about getting lots and lots of detail in at this stage. I'm basically just getting all the fundamentals in, airbrushing obviously the eye sockets, the nostrils, putting all the detail in, but I'll most likely add more with the darker tone, and I will definitely be sharpening it up. So that's one thing that I do with the darker tone. Alright, so we just want to establish all of our design. This gives us a chance to airbrush any sort of imperfections that you want to put into the skulls, like cracks and texture and whatnot. So you can put all that in there. You can see I'm shaping the nostril, that center bone piece as well. I leave that exposed, so I'm not just coating over everything. That's one thing that can make skulls look flat, if you just flat tone, solid black, everything in the middle. And that's another reason why I like to use these transparent, make up these transparent blacks, because it's much like tattooing, I suppose, where you start with the first strength of black and then you can gradually go darker. Similar sort of principle. So we just mix it up, and you know that that's as dark as it's going to go. Doesn't matter how close I go, I can't go darker than what you can sort of see there with the eye socket. And then what will happen is we'll mix up later in the part 2 of the video. We'll make up our final black, which will be just regular black mixed with a reducer, and that will be used to further render each skull, put in all the final details, and really shape all the shadows. Alright? So you can see that was the first part of this stretchy skin. Now you can see from what I'm doing here that that wasn't drawn in at all. So as I paint, I just make it up as I go. So that's something that obviously is difficult to teach. If you're unsure, you can kind of even mix up a lighter tone for your first tone. I've done this quite a few times, and I've got a lot more control over the airbrush. So if you're still new to airbrushing, that might be a good idea. Instead of going for such a dark tone, just make it a bit lighter, and then that'll make it easier for you, and it's less like prominent if you make a mistake, if that makes sense. So, and the beauty with skulls is that you can turn things into things. So if you stuff up a tooth, you can knock it out, like black it out and make it look like he's missing some teeth, he or she. So there's so many good things that you can do with skulls to make them look, you know, sometimes a mistake can make it look better than what it was intended to. So keep that in mind too. Alright, so I'm just building out the details, got a bit of tip drawing there, I think. Just working in, so up close for my cracks and all my real fine detail. Again, I'm using a eclipse here, so it's not, I mean, you can go super fine with an eclipse, don't get me wrong, but I will come in with a micron later and just tidy everything up. This is more just to get all the fundamentals in, get all the base done, and then we can work off that. So also, if you put the time in at this stage is always good. So that way you can always add more too. So don't feel like just because you're putting a crack there, it's just that's the only place you're gonna have to put it. The more you add, the more texture you add, a lot of the time the better it can look. Also keep varying the distance of your airbrush. So you can see I'm airbrushing with two hands, one of which is wearing a glove. Again, I've explained this in a few other videos, so be sure to wear a glove if you are spraying something that is automotive. That way you don't risk contaminating your surface. So I usually put the glove on my left hand because I'm a right-handed with the airbrush, so that way I can, if I have to, I can lean up against it with my left hand and I've got no chance of contaminating anything. So plus it's also a good way if you are testing or blasting out your airbrush, you can do it the inside of your glove. Just be careful that if it is wet, don't touch your surface obviously. So but either that or have a bit of paper next to you or something to blast it out in, or do your little strokes to practice. So just working that trigger finger, taking my time and working in the teeth at the moment. So, and trying to also plan that, you know, certain bits of skin hanging over certain areas and how I'm going to turn them into, are they going to be on top, are they going to be underneath? So all these little things are going through my mind as I'm painting, but I'm just trying to establish all the bits and pieces in the design first, and usually I start with all the main areas. So obviously with the skull, the eye sockets, the nose socket, then the jawline, and putting in the teeth, that sort of thing, just so that I know where I'm going. Sometimes I'll even come back further and I'll sketch them in nice and light, and then I can come back in with a darker color and tweak them. So I kind of use the airbrush as my pencil in a sense. So I'll just sketch with that first, and often if I'm not sure about where I'm going to go, if it's not a definite stroke set aside in my head, then I'll work further away from the surface so that it sprays it on a bit lighter, and then I can come in once I'm happy with the area that I'm working in and the where that stroke is going to appear, if that's the correct spot or not. Alright, so keep that in mind too. You can really see my trigger finger moving. So remember to keep that air on all the time. So I cannot stress that enough. If you're just starting out with airbrushing and this is your first time watching one of our videos, you'll probably hear me say this a lot. I tell my students constantly, you need to keep the air on. It is a double action airbrush and that's how you're meant to use it. You'll find that if you airbrush using the double action technique and you keep that air press down and you're just using your trigger finger, you'll not only be able to achieve all of the detail, it does take practice, but it will allow you to get that fine detail and control, but it also minimizes your tip drying, so it's a benefit there. So often I find most of my students, they, especially beginners, what happens is they'll be painting away after an hour or so, their brushes are getting really clogged. And the reason being is they still haven't grasped that double action technique, and that's what's blocking up the airbrush. Alright, so more often than not when you're starting out, that's what's causing it. A lot of people try and blame the paint or the airbrush, or it's just the way you're using it. So it all comes down to practice. So practice. It does take time to perfect, but once you've got it, then you'll be well on your way to creating some amazing artwork. So just working in all the detail, picking out all the elements of the design. So what I'm going to be doing with this video as well is we're going to do some of the video in real time, and then there will be sections that are sped up. So you can see at the moment we're painting in real time, but if it does speed up, then you know why. So just to keep things moving a little bit, so I'll try and show you the main sort of bits in real time, and then we can work off that. Okay, so just really working that trigger finger there. You'll see that going back and forth all the way through the video. Just moving away from the surface to put some shades in there. You can see I'm building on that stretchy skin. So just picking out random sections. So you can see when I'm further away, my trigger finger is pulling further back on the airbrush there. So that's obviously compensating. I want to shade a darker spot, so I'm coming back further to compensate the distance that I'm away from the surface, as opposed to when I'm up close, I'm trying to get fine lines so I'm not pulling back as much. So that's all your double action control. Alright, so you just got to keep practicing that. If this is your first time watching one of our videos, welcome, and feel free to hit subscribe if you enjoy the content. We try and put out a few tutorial videos like this, plus we also do live streams and other videos for you as well. With the live streams, we do try and do them weekly, so we cover all sorts of things, a few little tutorials, what we're working on in the shop, as well as new products and doing reviews and whatnot. So yeah, if you like this, or if you're new to airbrushing, or you want to get better at airbrushing, then by all means hit subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when we put out some more content. But thank you for joining us, and for all of those that are subscribed, we really appreciate your continued support, and we hope that you get as much out of this video as all the others that we've put out. So back to the airbrushing, you can see adding more and more detail, even shading some of those skin areas back into the skull, as you can see there. Working that in, just sketching away. Again, because I'm making it up, that's perfect there. You could see how I was further away, and I kind of drew that in first until I knew that, okay, I'm happy with that, and then I'll keep working in the detail just to define it. You can also see how I tend to move around on the image. I've explained this as well in some of my other videos. It's just a habit that I've gotten into. Try and keep it interesting as I'm painting as well. And that way I build the artwork. So especially when I do a skull, I don't just finish the eye sockets and the nose. I kind of work around it so that you're covering a lot of the negative space as well, and then that's changing the look of your design. So, because believe it or not, negative space does impact your design as well as the area that you are painting. So obviously when I say negative space, I mean the surrounding areas, and even by working on those or just around the edge of the skull, further away from the center section which you're sort of working on, then that does begin to help you understand how the whole piece is developing and whether or not you need to go darker in spots, leave them, or so just play around with it. You can see I'm adding some textures there. I'm bringing some of the shadows up from the teeth and putting in some of the imperfections, and also accentuating the skin areas. Even dusting back over parts like that nostril there, I just shaded back over the center bone just to knock it back a little bit. It was a bit too bright. So things like that, I'm always looking out for those things. So I'm scanning as I'm painting. Alright, so just working that in. Again, as the videos are going on, as you're watching, if you've got any questions once you finish watching, feel free to leave your comments below. I will endeavour to get back to most people. We do try and respond to nearly every comment, so if we do happen to miss one, we do apologise, but we do try our hardest to respond to everyone. So there we go, we're just putting in some other skin areas there, and you can see those bits there are sort of the background skin section, so they're not necessarily coming off that part of the skull, they're just underneath and behind the skull. Just working on that area there off the jaw. Hopefully this is clear enough for you to see what's going on. So really working that trigger finger there, pulling back to get some shading on there, and then working up close as well, just sketching in other areas of that skin. Also keep in mind, if you're more confident or more comfortable doing sort of these lines, because the skin that joins between each skull needs to be fairly straight and accurate. And if you find it difficult working vertically like I am, then by all means, if you find it more comfortable to do a horizontal line, then spin the panel sideways and do them that way. So don't feel like you need to work up and down if that doesn't work for you. And you can spin the panel, like in this case you can, then do that. I know some people also, when they're working off a reference, sometimes they'll turn the artwork upside down and turn the reference upside down as well and paint like that, so that they're virtually not looking at a picture, they're just looking at all of the shapes and shadows, and then that way they can accurately reproduce them. So it's kind of a good way to trick your eye. So keep that in mind. If you feel more comfortable doing it one way, then spin your panel around. Don't make it difficult for yourself. So just working in more of that skin texture and blending as well. So that way you can see, by blending and shading those areas, I'm bringing the top part of that skull, like the forehead part, out, so it looks like that skin's in front of the back of its head there. So pretty much finished most of that first skull. So now we're going to begin on skull number 2. Still using the same airbrush, using the same paint. Just blasting that out, getting rid of any tip drawing. And again, starting in the eye socket. This time I wanted to add an eyeball. So I start with the iris there, and I sort of tapered that down towards that other skin that's lifting up from the previous skull. So this is where you kind of make it up as you go. Adding a bit of detail. We'll get a bit closer soon with that one. The camera will go a bit closer later on, but at least this will give you an idea of how I link it all together. You can see there, just bringing that up to the eyeball there. So it kind of looks like the eyeball's melting into the previous, which is kind of cool. That's what we want to do. We want to link all the skulls together. So it's just a flowing design. All right. Working on the other eye socket and the nostril. So just airbrushing in that outline first to get that sharp edge, and then I begin to color in the center sections. Now the other eye socket. Again, I don't just color it solid. So darker at the top and then blending out towards the bottom just to give us that 3D effect. And now I'm going to start detailing around it. This is the other eye socket now. So because we've got the eyeball in there, we need to obviously work around the dark negative space around the eyeball. Just keep building your tones. And getting a bit more tip drying there. So even though this is automotive paint, it will still dry up on the needle because you've got air and paint passing through such a small area. So you'll constantly see that I'm blasting out the airbrush and also pick off the tip drying. So it's just something that you get used to doing. So working on that jawline there, trying to establish where the teeth have got to go. And then blending out to create that 3D effect. So just doing a gradation there, graduated tone. So dark around that area towards where the eye socket is, and then feathering it out. So that what that does is it gives us the curve of the shape of the skull's head. All right. Again, picking off tip drying, back into it. Adding all the details in. Trying not to go over the top of some of that skin that I've already created, and bringing some other areas into that as well. And then linking them up again, so it looks like it's all planned, which it sort of is. Okay, establishing the teeth. Now this particular skull, we made it look like he's missing some teeth as well, and he's got real uneven teeth, so it's good. You don't want them to have perfect teeth. It is a skull, so it's got to look a bit like he's had a bit of a hard life. So again, we're still running on normal time here. We haven't sped anything up as yet. We will do soon, because once you see a few of these being done, then the procedure is very much the same. But we will always revert back to airbrushing in real time as well, just so you can see the difference as the artwork progresses. So you can see I linked up a bit of that skin coming off the teeth there. Just working back over it. So I'm still essentially just sketching around the artwork, trying to establish all my key areas. So you'll find this step in particular is going to take the longest, because even though the other one we're detailing more, but this is, you've got to virtually draw everything in to start with. So this can definitely take the longest. And this is the one you want to take your time with too. You don't want to rush it, because you don't want to make any mistakes and draw things in incorrectly. This is essentially your template. So once you've done this, then you can just keep tweaking and improving on the artwork, adding extra elements, sharpening up your design, shading things a bit better. With the shadows, you can knock parts of the design into the distance, and then essentially the bits that you leave will pop forward, so you'll start to really see that 3D element. So remember, you don't want to rush it. You want to take your time, add as much or as little detail as you like, depending on what style of artwork you want to achieve. If you pretty much want to just work on something similar to this, well, just follow the video. You might need to watch it a few times, pause it, come back to certain areas, but by all means use it to help you out, and we do hope that it helps you out. So really, it really just comes down to practice more than anything. There's ways around it if you can't draw, but doing a lot of these skin pieces and joining things and making it look right, that does need a little bit of, I suppose, knowledge as far as art and composition and knowing where to put things. But like I said earlier, you could mix up a lighter tone of this particular black, so that you're essentially sketching with a really, really light pencil, and then you can deepen all your shadows and continue to add your detail from there. So up a bit closer now with the camera there, so you can see more of the detail being added. So a good trick, whenever you just probably noticed then, I drew in a bit of the back of the skull's head there, and I did that freehand just by following the line. Now whenever you're following a line and you want to establish a bit of a line, what I tend to do is I look ahead of where I'm going. So I'll work off a dark spot or somewhere where it's in a sense a safe area to start my line, and then look ahead and just follow that particular path. So it's a bit of practice, but it does tend to work. And you want to keep a consistent, sort of relatively consistent speed. You don't want to go too slow, because then it's a lot more difficult to get it smooth. So you want to sort of move in a normal sort of speed that you're comfortable with, and just keep it smooth and consistent. And try and keep your height the same as well. If you start to adjust your height, then that can also vary the thickness of your line. And that goes the same as when you're doing these skin sections. You could see there, the ones coming off the bottom of his chin there, I started further away, and then I kind of went in close really quickly, almost like a miniature dagger stroke. That will give you a tapered sort of effect. So you can use it to your advantage as well. So running a bit of a shadow now. And then adding a couple of little cracks here and there as well. Again, just making it up. Just shading a bit more in that eyeball section. Re-establishing the iris. Putting a bit more detail in there. Sharpening it up a little bit. And now we can move on to the next skull. Okay, so you can see now the video sped up a little bit. So we're just going to use the same principle as before. This time I just started with the nose socket because I ran that bit of skin from the previous skull right up into the nose. Just going to work those eye sockets in again. Same principle as before. So just sketching out my design from my lightly shaded template that we did earlier. Just carefully colour it in so that you keep your overspray contained. Start running some cracks and some texture. Establish all of the areas sort of in amongst that jaw area so that we can know where the teeth are going to go, bringing down some of that skin just to tie that one in as well. Start blending all my shadows. Begin to really shape the skull. Add a few more cracks and then a bit of a graduated tone there. Sketch in that jawline. Back of the skull there, so just follow that line like I explained to you guys earlier. Sketching in the teeth. I'm going to do the lower part, so the bottom row of teeth there as well. And you can see I blended that particular tooth into the skin, so it looks like it's all dripping down. So up really close to define in between your teeth. So be careful, don't pull back too far on your trigger when you're this close, because you could splurt the paint out and you could possibly even run it. So you don't want to ruin your artwork, so remember just to take your time and be up nice and close and keep the airbrush moving when you're pulling back on that trigger. Working on that jawline. Adding all the imperfections, the cracks. So you can see I'll draw out all the teeth first, and then I will start working on that bit of skin that comes up, so it looks like the teeth are lodged into that bone. Working on the eye sockets there. running a bit of a shadow and a sharper shadow, almost a line on that edge of the forehead. Bringing in some of the skin as well so that we can join this one to the next skull. More shadowing. Darkening off that area there. So you can see I keep working back in an area. So I'll move from one spot and then jump back onto it. So don't think you just have to completely finish one area. I find it a bit easier to move around a little bit. I'm just going to join a few more of these up. Starting to come to life, that skull there. So now we can move on to another one. Again, this part of the video is now sped up, but like you've seen a few of them done in real time, so you can always go back to those. The procedure is very much the same. So we started off with that eye socket. I've just put in some of the teeth, just double checking to my reference. So I pretty much just use the reference to establish the teeth, and then from there on I virtually just make it up as I go. And it doesn't matter if the skulls vary a little bit from your reference. You're not trying to do them photorealistic, and each skull can be different, so it doesn't matter if you you have the same reference. I often see that with my students. I'll give them exactly the same reference to work from, and every single person's artwork will be totally different. So it'll still look like what they've been given, but their own style, their own interpretation will come out. So it's exactly the same with this. So working the skin down into that other eye socket there, adding some more shadows. This is pretty much just the top jaw on this skull. So you can vary it up a little bit. Some can have eye sockets, some can have lower jaws, or you can just have them with the top jaw, whatever you like. And you can modify the templates as well to make that all work for you. Just sharpening up some of the detail there. Blend that down. Bring in that socket. Make it look like a bit of the eyes stretched up into that skull. Bit more shading to make that look a bit more 3D. Add a couple of cracks. Just more detail. Darkening off those eye sockets again. So if you're not happy with something, you can just come back in, sharpen it up, darken it up, whatever you got to do. And we start with the next skull. Almost done with laying them all out. Putting the eyeball in. Finishing off around the eyeball, the other part of the socket, doing the nose. So this one's got the bottom jaw, this particular skull, so we can work all that in as well and tie that into the previous one that's underneath it. So we'll start with some of the lower teeth so we can stretch them down. Working on the top teeth now. So you can see that bit of skin was airbrushed in to make it look like it's lifted up in front of that side cheekbone. Now we're just working on that lower jaw, establishing the design. So again, just using the airbrush to sketch, bringing in the shadows, bit of a graduated tone there. Just moving around the design, making sure that I'm happy with the way it's coming together. And then adding my little bits of detail and darkening off sections just to give it a bit of contrast and pop. And then working my skin sections off that too. And joining them up with the previous. Sorry about this bit of reflection there, but I think you can still see what's going on. So we've got some bits of skin working in behind that jaw there, which gives it a bit more of a 3D element. So you want to link all of the design together with the previous, so it looks like it's not just slapped up on top of it, it's all part of it, and it was deliberate. So I think I'm going to add one more skull in there, so we'll go close up for this so you can see. So we're using this particular template that we cut out earlier. I just felt like there was a bit of a gap at the top there, and this would fit nicely in that area. So we're just going to go ahead, lightly dust that in to get our shape. You can see there's not much really to work with, but enough, that's all we really need. And then using the same tone, we're just going to start to render the final skull that we're adding in. So for this one, I thought I'd start with the teeth. Bit of tip drawing. Airbrush is back in action. So we'll just begin to render those teeth in. Still using my Eclipse. So same airbrush for this whole part of this video. Part of the lower jaw, that section there. Bring some of that skin up so we get that 3D element. So those bits are in front, and we can straight away go ahead and tie this artwork into the rest so it doesn't look like it's been added last minute, even though we have added it last minute. Working on the area there behind the eye, adding some cracks in there. Working on that jawbone. bringing some of the stretchy skin up into that area of the jaw so we can tie it all in. Blending that out, putting in the little detail here and there, sharpening up certain areas. Still working on those teeth, nearly got the top section all done, and finishing off that bottom row. Doing my little dagger strokes off the top of the teeth there. Working in the eye socket, again following my original line that was created with the freehand template. So you can also put the template back on there and render off that if you like, but I want it to have more of a freehandy sort of feel. I don't want it to look masked in any way. If you're trying to do a more realistic skull, then you probably would utilize the stencil more just to get those really defined sharp edges. So just running some drop shadows, again working on the skin and in between the teeth. So I'm just coming back in now after sketching them in and making them more defined. So still using the same transparent black mix that we've been using throughout the whole video. So you can see how much variation we can get with that. From firstly just lightly dusting in on the templates to give us that light impression, to going up closer and heavier to get darker areas and to really shape each individual skull. So it's a good way to bring them all to life using just the one tone. And then obviously in the next video, part 2 to this video, where we'll finish off the design, we will go with a black mixed with reducer to really sharpen everything up. Okay. So almost done with the rendering on this one. So just a little bit longer, just adding a couple more little shapes and shadows in. A couple of little details here and there, a bit more texture, blending out, another gradation there. Just sort of fogging in over the top of that skull. Again, we can still come and tweak a few things. The back of the cranium there, airbrush that in. And just a couple of the teeth, just in between the teeth there, just finishing that off. Just to really sharpen them up. Blending over the top to give the whole head a bit of shape, and working in that skin area. So there you have it. That's that skull done now, and all the others have been completed with that first tone. So I'm just going to show you a couple of quick pictures here of the completed panel. So this is what it looks like so far. You can see that's the bottom skull, working our way up right to the top of that panel. So thanks for watching part 1 of this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you come back and check out part 2 so that you can see the finished artwork. In the meantime, if you haven't already, feel free to hit subscribe. We have plenty of step-by-step tutorials, quick tips, airbrush insight, showcase, live streams, and much more. You can also visit our website at airbrushasylum.com.au. Thanks for watching.